Treasure Island, chapter 34, and last. The next morning we fell early to work, for the transportation of this great mass of gold near a mile by land to the beach, and thence 3 miles the boat to the Hispaniola, was a considerable task for so small a number of workmen. The 3 fellows still abroad upon the island did not greatly trouble us. A single sentry on the shoulder of the hill was sufficient to ensure us against any sudden onslaught, and we thought, besides, they had more than enough of fighting. Therefore the work was pushed on briskly. Gray and Ben Gunn came and went with the boat, with the rest, during their absences, piled treasure on the beach. 2 of the bars, slung a rope's end, made a good load for a grown man, one that he was glad to walk slowly with. For my part, as I was not much use at carrying, I was kept busy all day in the cave, packing the minted money into bread bags. It was a strange collection, like Billy Bones's hoard for the diversity of coinage, but so much larger and so much more varied, that I think I never had more pleasure than in sorting them. English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Georges and Louises, doubloons and double guineas, and moidores and sequins, the picture of all the kings of Europe for the last 100 years, strange oriental pieces stamped with what looked like wisps of string or bits of spider's web, round pieces and square pieces, and pieces bored through the middle as if to wear them around your neck. Nearly every variety of money in the world must, I think, have found a place in that collection. And for number, I am sure they were like great autumn leaves, so that my back ached with stooping and my fingers with sorting them out. Day after day this work went on, but every evening a fortune had been stowed aboard, and there was another fortune waiting for the morrow. And all this time we heard nothing of the 3 surviving mutineers. At last, I think it was on the 3rd night, the doctor and I were strolling on the shoulder of the hill where it overlooks the lowlands of the isle, when, from out the darkness below, the wind brought us a noise between shrieking and singing, and it was only a snatch that reached our ears, followed by the former silence. "Heaven forgive them," said the doctor. "'Tis the mutineers." "All drunk, sir," struck in the voice of Silver from behind us. Silver, I should say, was allowed his entire liberty, and, in spite of daily rebuffs, seemed to regard himself once more as quite a privileged and friendly dependent. Indeed, it was remarkable how well he bore these slights, and with what unwearying politeness he kept on trying to intricate himself with all. Yet, I think, none treated him better than a dog, unless it was Ben Gunn, who was still terribly afraid of his old quartermaster, or myself, who had really something to thank him for, although, for that matter, I suppose, I had a reason to think even worse of him than anybody else, for I had seen him meditating a fresh treachery upon the plateau. Accordingly, it was pretty gruffly that the doctor answered him. "Drunk or raving," said he. "Right you were, sir," replied Silver, "and precious little odds to you and me." "I suppose you would hardly ask me to call you a humane man," returned the doctor with a sneer, "and so my feelings may surprise you, Master Silver. But if I was sure they were raving, as I am morally certain one, at least, of them is down with fever, I should leave this camp, and at whatever risk to my own carcass, take the assistance of my skull." "Ask your pardon, sir? You'd be very wrong," quoth Silver. "You would lose your precious life, and you may lay to that. I'm on your side now, hand and glove, and I shouldn't wish for it to see the party weakened, let alone yourself, seeing as I know what I owes you. But these men down there, they couldn't keep their word. No, not supposing they wished to, and what's more, they couldn't believe as I could. They couldn't believe as you could." "No," said the doctor, "you're the man to keep your word, we know that." Well, That was about the last news we had of the 3 pirates. Only once we heard a gunshot a great way off, and supposed them to be hunting. A council was held, and it was decided that we must desert them on the island. To the huge glee, I must say, of Ben Gunn, and with the strong approval of Gray. We left a good stock of powder and shot, the bulk of the salt goats, a few medicines, and some other necessaries, tools, clothing, a spare sail, a fathom or two of rope, and, by the particular desire of the doctor, a handsome present of tobacco. That was about all our last doing on the island. Before that, we had got the treasure stowed, and had shipped enough water and the remainder of the goat meat in case of any distress. And at last, one fine morning, we weighed anchor, which was about all that we could manage, and stood out on the north inlet, the same colours flying that the captain had flown and fought under the palisade. The three fellows must have been watching us closer than we thought for, as soon as we had proved, for coming through the narrow we had to lie very near the southern point, and there we saw all three of them kneeling together on a spit of sand with their arms raised in supplication. It went to all our hearts, I think, to leave them in the wretched state, but we could not risk another mutiny, and take them home for the gibbet would have been a cruel sort of kindness. The doctor held them and told them of the stores we had left and where they were to find them, but they continued to call us by name and appeal to us, for God's sake, to be merciful and not leave them to die in such a place. At last, seeing the ship still bore on her course, and was now swiftly drawing out of earshot, one of them, I don't know which it was, leapt to his feet with a hoarse cry, whipped his musket to his shoulder, and sent a shot whistling over Silver's head and through the mainsail. After that, we kept under cover of the bulwarks, and when I next looked out, they had disappeared from the spit, and the spit itself had almost melted out of sight in the growing distance. There was, at least, the end of that, and before noon, in my inexpressible joy, the highest rock of Treasure Island had sunk into the blue round of sea. We were so short of men that everyone on board had to bear a hand, only the captain lying on a mattress in the stern and giving his orders, for though greatly recovered, he was still in want of quiet. We laid ahead for the nearest port in Spanish America, for we could not risk the voyage home without fresh hands, and as it was, with what baffling winds and a couple of fresh gales, we were all worn out before we reached it. It was just at sundown when we cast anchor in the most beautiful land, locked Gulf, and were immediately surrounded by shore boats full of Negroes and Mexican Indians and half-bloods, selling fruit and vegetables and offering to dive for bits of money. The sight of so many good-humoured faces, especially the blacks, the taste of the tropical fruits, and above all, the light that began to shine in the town, made the most charming contrast to the dark and bloody sojourn on the island, and the doctor and the squire, taking me along with them, went ashore to pass the early part of the night. Here they met the captain of an English man of war, fell in talk with him, went on board his ship, and in short, had so agreeable a time. That day was breaking when we came alongside the Hispaniola. Ben Gunn was on deck alone, and as soon as we came aboard, he began with wonderful contortions to make us a confession. Silver was gone. The Maroon had connived at his escape in the shore boat some hours ago, and he now assured us he had only done so to preserve our lives, which would certainly have been forfeit if that man with one leg had stayed aboard. But this was not all. The sea cook had not gone empty-handed. He had cut through a bulkhead unobserved, and had removed one of the sacks of coin worth perhaps 300 or 400 guineas to help him with the further wanderings. I think we were all pleased to be so cheaply quit of him. Well, to make a long story short, we got a few hands on board, made a good cruise home, and the Hispaniola reached Bristol just as Mr. Blandy was beginning to think of fitting out her consort. 5 men only of those who had sailed returned with us. Drink and the devil had done for the rest with a vengeance, although, to be sure, we were not quite in so bad a case as that other ship they sang about. with 1 man of her crew alive, what put to sea was 75. All of us had an ample share of the treasure, and used it wisely or foolishly, according to our natures. Captain Smollett was now retired from sea. Gray not only saved his money, but, being suddenly smit with a desire to rise, also studied his profession, and he is now mate and part owner of a fine, fully rigged ship, married besides, and the father of a family. As for Ben Gunn, he got £1,000, which he spent or lost in 3 weeks, or, to be more exact, in 19 days, for he was back begging on the 20th. Then he was given a lodge to keep, exactly as he had feared upon the island, but he lived still in great favour, though something of a butt with the country boys, and a notable singer in the church on Sundays and Saints' days. Of Silver we've heard no more. The formidable seafaring man with 1 leg has at last gone out of my life, but I dare say he met his old negress, and perhaps still lives in comfort with her and Captain Flint. It is to be hoped so, I suppose, for his chances of comfort in another world are very small. The bar silver and the arms still lie, for all that I know, where Flint buried them, and certainly they shall lie there for me. Oxen and wain ropes would not bring me back again to that accursed island, and the worst dreams that ever I have are when I hear the surf booming about the coasts, or start upright in bed with the sharp voice of Captain Flint still ringing in my ears. Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8!